Hello guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about helicopters, how to play them, and kind of the different types of helicopters that there are in the game, and how to research them. This has been a much requested topic in the Discord, so if you want some input into the videos, don't forget to check out the link down below for the Discord. Now, I'm only going to talk about how things are relevant to War Thunder, so any actual real-life mechanics of helicopters will be generally quite simplified. There won't be any in-depth technical explanations. So, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe, and we'll get into the video. So, to just unlock helicopters to begin with, you will need either a rank 5 plane or tank in the tech tree that you wish to unlock. But as their only real use is as CAS, if you don't have a rank 5 tank, there isn't really much point in researching them anyway. Or at least a tank of a high enough BR that you can use the helicopter with it. And the best way to grind helicopters is just by playing ground. Just tick this little box here that says research of helicopters by playing ground vehicles and go nuts. Like, you can research helicopters by playing the helicopter PvE mode, but it's very slow and quite boring. Whereas just by ticking that little box, it means you won't be researching any tanks anymore. All of that research will go into helicopters, and as you'll soon see, there are many helicopters that aren't even worth playing, even in ground battles. So you can kind of broadly split all of the helicopters into 4 categories. Also, there will be an in-depth explanation on how to actually fly a helicopter in the second half of the video. So check the chapters down below if you aren't too interested in an explanation of the types of helicopters. But the first main category are just memers, honestly. And unfortunately, if you play the United States, Japan, Italy, Sweden, or Israel, that's going to be the first helicopter you unlock. It's a meme trash helicopter that has no real value. These helicopters all have no ballistics computer and no ATGM, just rockets. Except for Sweden, because Sweden likes to be different, they just have a very slow, very short-range missile instead, but it's equally as useless. If your heli doesn't have a stock missile, or at least CCIP for rockets to grind the missile with, just avoid it. You can have fun with it, and it might be, you know, haha, funny memes to play. I mean, you're looking at the footage in the background, that's what I'm doing, but it's not a serious way to grind and is strictly for memery purposes. The second category are going to be helicopters like the British Scout AH and the Swedish HKP-2. These helicopters come with a stock missile, generally 3 to 4 kilometers in range, and they're going to be your first workhorse helicopter, your first actual playable close air support helicopter. They rarely are going to have additional features, and they're going to have no defenses against enemy aircraft. Maybe you'll have a machine gun if you're lucky. Also, when you're playing these helicopters, make sure to wiggle side to side when playing them, because it's very easy for SPAAs to just shoot you out of the sky if you're sitting still. Gun-based SPAA will find it quite hard to hit an unpredictably moving target at 3 kilometers or so, which is where you should aim to be. Remember, if you're firing at a moving target, your missile will curve, so therefore travel a longer distance than the straight line to the target. So if your missile says 4 kilometers on it, maybe you want to be at 3 or 3.5 to give you a bit of extra wiggle room. But just bear in mind, if a plane shows up, there's going to be very little you can do against them. The third category are going to be helicopters like the Soviet Mi-24P and the American AH-1F. You will have a slightly longer ranged missile, usually 4 or 5 kilometers. You also start getting access to things like chaff, flare, night vision, early air-to-air missiles, even infrared countermeasures or an RWR. Some more toys, but you're essentially still quite limited. Mainly the advantage is going to be the increase in speed of the missile, because the early ones are painfully slow. They can take over 20 seconds to reach the target. Just bear in mind that your countermeasures will very rarely be effective against SPAA, so use terrain to dodge the missiles, pop up above terrain, you see something coming, you go back down. However, countermeasures and early missiles will help against aircraft because their missiles usually at this BR will be able to be flared, and yours often have countermeasures. The last category I'll mention is just all helicopters sort of 10-3 and up. They'll have things like auto tracking on their targeting, advanced RWRs, a full ballistics computer, strong air-to-air missiles, and in some cases at the very top tier, fire and forget missiles like Spike or PARS. If I do cover these types of advanced helicopters, it will be in a separate video. But before we get into some examples, let's quickly just talk about the keybinds that you'll need. They're actually pretty good by default, but there are some extra ones that you'll need. These are jettison secondary weapon. This is quite useful if you're hit and you're trying to get back to base and you're carrying a whole bunch of ATGMs or rocket pods. It makes you lighter and it increases your chance of getting back. Small caliber, large caliber, and additional guns, just bind them all to the same key, so then when you press down left mouse, in my case, you'll fire all of your guns at the incoming aircraft. Switch secondary weapons. This lets you choose exactly what you're using. This can be especially useful if you have air-to-air missiles. Fire countermeasures. You can also bind chaff and flare separately if you wish, but like I say, there isn't a huge amount of use to this in helicopters. You also have the option for toggle cannon ballistic computer. This is good if you want to use your cannon against ground targets and you actually have a ballistic computer. It will usually start disabled. As for rockets, there isn't really any point enabling or disabling ballistic computer for rockets, because if you're carrying rockets, you're going to be using rockets. And if you're not carrying rockets, why do you even need the keybind? Okay, so let's go for a test drive. Alright, we're sitting on the helipad. The first thing you're going to notice is that there's no throttle control. In a helicopter, you have something called collective pitch. In short, this controls the angle of the rotor blades. How and why isn't super important, but if you want full power, you'll need to set your collective so that your RPM is as close to 100% as you can get it. Every helicopter behaves a little bit differently and some are more responsive than others. I've chosen the H-34 for this demo because it responds quite slowly and it's obvious that they're not directly linked. So as I increase the collective, you can see it does actually take some time for the RPM to follow it up. For this specific helicopter, 99% RPM and a collective in the high 80s tends to work best. But this will heavily depend on which helicopter you're flying, what engine modifications you've got researched, and a few other factors. Even the weather can affect it. So this is something you'll have to learn for your personal choice of helicopter. But now that we've climbed up a bit, let's enable hover mode. Our collective switches over to hover and a percentage. A positive number means you're going up, a negative is down, and 0% is stationary. But bear in mind, using this is a bit of a noob trap because it makes it incredibly easy for SPAAs to lock you up and shoot you down. Like, I can think of some like niche scenarios at like higher tiers where you might want to just pop just barely up above something and then fire off whatever you have to fire off and then go back down again. But especially at the lower BRs where this guide is kind of aimed at, that isn't really a very necessary tactic. Although you can feel free to try it out. So you always want to be drifting in one direction and constantly change the direction of your drift and speed. This will throw off SPAAs. You know, go up a bit, down a bit, left a bit, right a bit in various directions, you know, tilt backwards and forwards. As for HUD symbology, the W in the middle is a representation of your helicopter and it shows your roll axis. The two lines on either side show level flight, and with mouse aim, it will always try to keep the wings level. So if you do roll, it will immediately roll back to wings level. The arrow coming from the middle of the W shows your direction of travel, and the size of the arrow shows how fast you're going. Bigger arrow, bigger speed. On the right, we have our height above sea level and our vertical speed. So now you've got the basics, let's get some target practice. Point your nose in the direction of the target, but keep your crosshair roughly on the horizon. If the nose is pointed down, you'll start to accelerate towards the enemy, which is a good way to die. Set your collective so that your vertical speed on the right is, positive or negative, but just not by a lot. And then make sure an arrow is visible from the W to make sure that you're drifting in one direction, just a little bit. This will make it much harder for enemies to shoot you down. Now, using free look, place the target in the middle of your screen and press the sight stabilization key. A red box will now appear, and this kind of tells your helicopter's camera, hey, look over here. Now you can change view to be in the gunner sight. First thing you'll notice is a flashing green square. Your crosshair must be inside this square for you to fire your ATGM. In the bottom center of the screen, we have a box, and that displays the total gimbal limit of your helicopter's camera. It also displays your flashing launch zone window. While sight stabilization is active, a range will appear under your crosshair. This is the range to the target, whatever you're currently aiming at. You'll also see a bar to the right of the launch zone box that displays the maximum range of your missile, as well as the sliding bar to show you the range of your current aim point. You want to make sure that the distance you have there is always less than the maximum range, but give yourself a little bit of leeway to work with in case the target moves, because obviously if the target is moving, then your missile will have to curve through the air to chase them, thus increasing the distance it has to travel. Then use Q and E to yaw your helicopter's nose onto target, place the crosshair inside the box, and then fire. After that, place and hold your crosshair on the target until the missile connects. And this basic overview is the core of how all helicopters are used the majority of the time, excluding, rocket memes. Things do change a bit when you have access to things like automatic target tracking on more modern helicopters or thermals or other things that add a little bit of complexity. But this basic formula is going to be the same no matter what, really. This, along with some other more advanced features, might be covered in a part 2 if there's enough interest. So let me know in the comments if you are interested in a part 2 on the higher tier helicopters. But this has been my helicopter guide, so thank you for coming, guys. Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.